You're listening to Rush's Week in Review.
Greetings to you. I am Rush Limbaugh, America's real anchorman, as well as America's truth detector and the doctor of democracy. Here, emitting vocal vibrations resonating coast to coast on the largest talk radio network and radio program in the country. Happy to have you with us, as always. If you want to be on the program, who doesn't? 800-282-2882. The email address, lrushbo@eibnet.us. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask you a couple of questions to ponder just as human beings here. Take politics out of it as much as you can when dealing with my questions. It's impossible to totally do it, but I just want to ask, how many of you, as human beings, are capable of doing what this woman in Northern California has just done? For example, and specifically, you're minding your own business. You're living your life. You went to high school with people. You worked with people and all that. You are a renowned left-wing activist. You wear vagina hats on your head when Donald Trump was elected president. No, in fact, let's not do that. You're just an average, ordinary person. You don't do any of that, even though this woman did. My first question is, how many of you would knowingly attempt to derail the life and career of someone you peripherally knew 35 years ago? How many of you would do that? Now, I don't know what the law of averages is. I'm sure with as many people in this country, there's a lot of creeps and a lot of vindictive people. And I'm not saying it isn't possible, but how many of you do you realize how often this happens with the Democrat Party and conservative judicial nominees? But how many of you would do it? You didn't know somebody well. You didn't date them. They didn't break your heart. They didn't do anything to you that you can really, you can't remember where it happened. You can't remember even specifically what happened. This person that you are actively trying to destroy has been in public life for years, and not once in any of those occasions where his name has been mentioned publicly have you done anything to try to stop or derail it. But then this man happens to become a Supreme Court nominee. How many of you would do this? How many of you would either make up a story and send a letter, which leads to my second question. My point is, decent people this is not how people act. This is not how people think. I know there's a lot of vindictiveness, and I know there are a lot of people that seek revenge, but that usually derives from knowing somebody well enough that whatever they did genuinely angered you or hurt you or harmed you. But this is peripheral. What kind of person does this? And then after doing it, doesn't want to follow it through? I'm now seeing excuses made for the fact that she doesn't want to appear at the hearing that Grassley has invited her to. Well, the excuse is, I wouldn't want to appear. I wouldn't want to have to face those questions. I wouldn't have to want to face those Klieg lights. I totally understand this woman not accepting the invitation, I'm hearing people say. And just because she doesn't accept the invitation to appear doesn't mean that she's lying and making it up. Okay, so we're told by this woman's lawyer that she does not have to corroborate her allegation. It's not up to her. We have got to prove she's lying. She does not have to prove she's telling the truth. That stands justice on its head. The next thing we're being told, it's perfectly normal for an accuser to not want to be part of the process of getting rid of her accused. It's perfectly normal that she wouldn't want to appear before these senators. It's perfectly normal she wouldn't want to appear. I wouldn't, they're saying. I wouldn't want to do. Well, not only would you, how many of you would get yourselves involved in this situation in the first place? Unless you are a dyed-in-the-wool political activist. Now, my second question is a little bit more basic. Is it really this easy? Is all you have to do to derail the career of an acknowledged as great human being in justice, is all you've got to do is send a letter to Senator Dianne Feinstein? Is that it? It's that easy. We're to believe that all somebody has to do is send a letter, an anonymous letter, well, a letter requesting anonymity to Senator Dianne Feinstein, and that alone can derail the life and the reputation and the career of a decent human being. Is it really that easy? Do we want it to be that easy? Not only all you have to do is send a letter to Senator Dianne Feinstein, but that you will automatically be taken seriously and that you will automatically be believed. If that's all it takes, we could start a letter writing campaign to Senator Feinstein today. Could we not? I mean, we're being asked to really swallow a lot here, folks. We're being asked to believe quite a bit. These kinds of things just don't happen in the real world, except when Democrats are involved and the Supreme Court's involved. And by the way, you know, there's a dance everybody's doing to avoid hitting the bullseye here. Dawn, what do you think the bullseye really is here? What do you think has a Democrat so paranoid, so frightened, so agitated, so animated, motivated to stop this guy? What is it? Well, yeah, but why? I know they don't want him in a court. It's one word, begins with an A. This is all about abortion. It is about nothing else. As far as the left is concerned, they want to be able to continue uninterrupted with their behavior when it comes to abortion. Sex without consequence, life without consequence. They are scared to death that a Republican or conservative majority is going to overturn Roe versus. Now, there are other concerns, too. I mean, just the fact that being a majority conservative court isn't enough. But this, and nobody's talking about it, that's how you know that that's what this is really about. They cannot allow anything to happen to Roe versus Wade. And it won't. That's what's crazy. It won't. But is it really just this easy? That's all you have to do. A letter from somebody that can't even remember where or when or for sure with who some allegation, some activity happened. That's all it takes. And how many of you would do this? My point is, this isn't normal, folks. This is not how the normal segment of the people in our country live and operate. And yet, it defines, shapes, influences the way Washington, D.C. works. And it's just another add-on as to why so many people are so fed up and disgusted. Because all it takes is a letter that Dianne Feinstein didn't even act on immediately. And then when she did announce it, she announced it because her colleagues were going to leak it. And the person that wrote the letter supposedly didn't want her name used, didn't want anything done with this. Well, then why send the letter in the first place? Do you think they have given one iota's thought to the impact this is going to have on Brett Kavanaugh's life, his wife, his 2 kids, all of the people with whom he comes in contact? He coaches little girls in softball and basketball or whatever. He does incredible amounts of charitable work for the needy and the homeless. Do you think they have the slightest concern over the fact that they are trying to destroy a career and a life and a future? I can tell you right now, it's not even crossed their mind, except to the extent that if that happens, it's justified because this guy's a conservative judge and he deserves to have an excrement sandwich as his life every day. That's how they look at all of this. But it really got me today when I found the woman's lawyer claiming it's not up to us to corroborate our charge. It's not. No, we don't have to corroborate anything. As I said, this is just textbook. This is Harry Reid calling the press, and I have a friend that told me that Mitt Romney hadn't paid his taxes in 10 years. And the press said, well, who's your friend? Where'd you get this? How long? And Reid got mad at him. Dingy Harry got mad. What do you mean? What are you asking me for? You need to go ask Romney why he hadn't paid his taxes in 10 years. And the press said, oh, yeah, you're right. And they did. They left Harry Reid and they started chasing down Romney, wanting to know why he hadn't paid his taxes in 10 years. And all it took was somebody, a phantom, anonymous letter to Harry Reid claiming that Mitt Romney hadn't paid taxes in 10 years. When, in fact, he had. Now we've got a letter to Dianne Feinstein that arrived this past July. Nothing was done with it because the Democrats tried to kick Kavanaugh off the court using everything but it. But now it's desperation time, plan B. Okay, I got to take another brief time out. We will continue much more straight ahead right after this.
He's right in so many ways. Rush on the EIB Network.
Do you realize we may have been the victims of a decades-long medical scam? Have you seen the news? No evidence that high levels of cholesterol cause heart disease, doctors claim. This doesn't surprise me at all. And how many people are out there taking statins and go and get their cholesterol tested, good and bad? Oh, look, it's high. Look at your triglyceride. Oh, my God, we got to get you on medication. To get you on medication, you start changing the way you like because you're thinking you're eating stuff that they scrape out of your arteries and your veins there when you go in and have open heart or clear out put the angioplasty in there. It turns out it may not be true. It's UK media news. Doctors have found there's no evidence of a link between high levels of bad cholesterol and heart disease, according to a study. And with this claim, a number of leading cardiologists say that statins taken by millions of Brits to tackle cholesterol don't have any benefit at all. Their findings, published in the Expert Review of Clinical Pharmacology, suggest the drugs will not treat heart disease. As they say, high bad cholesterol levels don't necessarily lead to heart disease. 17 doctors from across the world appear to have dispelled the theory that there are links between having high LDL-C levels, known as bad cholesterol, and fatty deposits that clog arteries. You know, how much of what we think we know is just BS for a host of reasons, but it seems like you know what was also dispelled yesterday? A baby aspirin a day, or when you're having a heart attack, doesn't mean anything. It won't help. It won't change anything. And in fact, taking too much aspirin could hurt your stomach lining or some such thing. But an 81 milligram aspirin tablet for heart health, according to some doctors yesterday, is a worthless placebo type activity. Might help you psychologically, but it's not changing a thing. Now, the theory is that if you're having a heart attack or think you are, take one of those babies. It'll thin your blood a little bit to help alleviate heart attack symptoms. Now some people came out yesterday, it's bogus, that isn't true. Think of all the things that we grew up thinking were going to kill us, which is everything. Anyway, let me get back to the phones. Don't want to lose the momentum here. David in Colleyville, Texas. Great to have you, sir. Welcome to the EIB Network.
Thank you, sir. I'm just calling about Brett Kavanaugh. I used to work for him at the White House, and something you said just about how this pains you, this is just, there's a lot of bad things that happen in politics. You know, the National Guard documents, there's a lot of things that have really upset me, but this one has just really hit hard. This is a good man. You know, I tell people he's one of those people that you just hope you'll come across, you know, once in your life, and you hope some part of them will rub off on you. And just so much of what I know about being a professional, you know, balancing work and life, treating people of all levels with respect, you know, I learned from him, and he's just, you know, a good, decent person. And
now, if you knew him in the White House, that means that was when he was staff secretary?
Yes, sir. And it was long hours, and it was stressful, but he, you know, and there were stressful days, but he never failed to just, even when no one was watching, just do the right thing, you know, treat anyone with respect. You just always knew he would do the right thing. And I can just tell you, you're not out on a limb by defending him. You know, he is, I just appreciate you being bold. You know, I don't think we have to grant that there's any merit to this. You know, I just believe that they're bearing false witness. I think this is totally wrong. It offends my sense of justice. And this is just a good man. And I just don't think he should have to go through this.
I don't either. There's not a shred of evidence of this kind of behavior or even allegation at any time, at any stage of his life. Not anything even close. The fact that they have to go back to high school where everybody was at one time immature and was playing around with alcohol and having a beer here or there when they were not old enough to be able to metabolize it and stay sober. We've all done this. It's all part of growing up. And to now claim that an incident that the victim claims to not even be able to remember enough significant details can derail not just a nomination to the Supreme Court, but a life and a career. It's obscene. It is absurd. And all it takes is a single letter to a United States senator to get this done. You're absolutely right. This is injustice on steroids.
It is. They're libeling the man. You know, it just relates to, you know, we just so happen to be in the Me Too era, and now they're claiming he's a Me Too guy. I mean, just because there's a lot of examples of people out there doing bad things doesn't mean that he has. You know, they've got nothing on him. He's a tour de force. You know, this is just totally unjust. And, you know, a lot of us who worked with him are just kind of texting each other, just saying, what can we do? And I just thought, you know, I'm just going to pick up the phone, and I just want to thank you for supporting him, and I just want to encourage everyone out there to be upset about this, because this is just totally, totally wrong.
Well, while I've got you, I've got 1 minute. What do you think of this circus that they've scheduled in the Senate for Monday? I mean, how can that possibly become anything but a circus?
I don't see how it can be anything other than a circus. I mean, some of the original hearing was a circus, you know, and I couldn't believe how, I can because I've seen it, but 13, 14 hours into each day, you know, he literally is citing footnote 9 of the Chevron decision, you know, at the end of the third day of the hearing without even looking down. I mean, the guy's incredible. And now they're going to trot him there on Monday. Maybe she'll show up, maybe she won't, and he's going to have to, it's indignity. I mean, to have to sit there and say,
total.
It's just horrible. I mean,
it's total indignity. That's the word for this. It is indignity. It is undignified for practically everybody involved. And he's willing, however, to go through it in order to see all of this through. Look, I appreciate the call, David. Thank you.
You're listening to Rush's Week in Review.
Hi, welcome back. There is a development, and I don't know what I think about this. I had my gut reaction to it, and then I backed off. And I started thinking about it. It's a tweet from Senator Susan Collins. Susan Collins is from Maine. She is buddy-buddy with Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, two Republican senators who are constantly thought to be on the bubble. And whenever there is a judicial nominee for any position, but especially the Supreme Court, if there is any it is said that if there is the slightest indication that that nominee might not be thinking the right way on abortion, then Susan Collins and Murkowski will vote with Democrats to kill the nomination. And because of this, the Democrats are constantly applying pressure to both of them, and they have been working overtime to try to pressure Susan Collins to commit to voting against Kavanaugh because of their claims that he would reverse Roe versus Wade and all that paranoia that the Democrats have. And she resisted. So the next thing they did, they created a GoFundMe campaign for a phantom candidate to oppose her in the Senate campaign for Maine. In that GoFundMe campaign, or however they funded it, reached $1 million. They were trying to blackmail her. They were telling her, if you will commit to voting against Kavanaugh, then we'll pull this money out of the race against you, and we will not assist a candidate who opposes you. And she didn't buck to that. And so when that failed, they sent her, and I'm not making this up, and I'm sorry I have to tell you, but they sent her a 3-foot cardboard cutout of male genitalia in another attempt to, I don't know what, bully her or offend her. And she said, this is it. I've had enough of this. I've had enough of these anti-Kavanaugh tactics. So that's Susan Collins, and she has been, as I say, target for much bullying and manipulation by the left. So she sent a tweet out a little over an hour ago. Her tweet says, I'm writing to the chairman and ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. That would be Grassley and Feinstein. I'm writing to the chairman and ranking member of the Judiciary Committee respectfully recommending that at Monday's hearing, lawyers for Professor Ford be allocated time to question Judge Kavanaugh, and lawyers for Judge Kavanaugh be granted equal time to question Professor Ford, followed by questions from senators. My first reaction when I saw that was, why don't we just cash in the chips now and say the country as we knew it is over? We're now officially the Jerry Springer show in the United States Senate. Or take your pick. Whatever daytime soap opera fare that people watch. Are we serious about this? That lawyers for Professor Ford be allowed time to question Kavanaugh, and that his lawyers be allowed time to question her. By the way, she still has not responded to the invitation to show up to this thing on Monday. I think they ought to bag this and just do the vote on Thursday. To hell with it. Just bag it and do it. But they won't because they're afraid of losing it now. But that doesn't matter. The committee vote doesn't matter. Mitch McConnell can schedule a full Senate vote on this nominee without the committee voting. Just Senate, protocol that the Judiciary Committee has a vote, and then that's supposed to inform the rest of the Senate that it's okay to vote for the guy or that they shouldn't. I mean, that's how silly it is. The Judiciary Committee vote's not going to determine how people in the general population of the Senate vote, but we're actually, because somebody sent a letter to Dianne Feinstein, we're going to do all that. We're going to have a circus on Monday, and Code Pink and every leftist protest group's going to be in there. If you remember the embarrassment that happened during the confirmation hearings for 4 days, Kavanaugh's parents with their heads in their hands in a moment that any other time in American history would be one of the proudest, most glorious days for an American family, that one of their children had succeeded and achieved in life to the point of being nominated to be an associate justice on the United States Supreme Court, and it was turned into circus is not even the right way to describe what they did. With the Democrats' acquiescence and letting it happen, I am certain. What should have been a moment of great pride and overwhelming love and excitement was turned into a despicable, embarrassing spectacle that was beneath all of the decency this country is known for. And it was by design. If they allowed that to happen during confirmation hearings, can you imagine what this thing on Monday would become? So lawyers interrogate her, then other lawyers interrogate him. This man is a nominee to be on the United States Supreme Court, an allegation that her lawyers say she doesn't even have to prove. And then after all that, blowhard senators get their turn asking questions. Dianne Feinstein, Chuck Schumer, Dick Durbin. Susan Collins then tweeted, such an approach would provide more continuity. It would elicit the most information and allow an in-depth examination of the allegations. That is just, folks, it's whatever it is a gigantic come down. At any rate, all this notwithstanding, her tweet probably will send the Democrats into orbit with rage because they were counting on flipping her. They were counting on her saying before this even began, she's had enough. This is the last straw. I can't support the guy. Look at what's being said. I can't possibly, but that's what they were hoping Collins would say. Now she wants to see a circus. Kavanaugh's lawyer, he's hired a lawyer. I should tell you this. Brett Kavanaugh's hired Beth Wilkinson. Does the name ring a bell? Does anybody know who Beth Wilkinson is? A, she's the wife of David Gregory of CNN/NBC. B, she represented Hillary Clinton's staffers during the FBI investigation into Clinton's private server. Those staffers were Cheryl Mills, Jake Sullivan, Heather Samuelson, and Philippe Raines. She's also said to be a stellar lawyer, and apparently one of her specialties is defamation. Attacking and defending defamation, which is exactly what this is. This is an upfront attempt to defame and destroy Brett Kavanaugh. I was saying yesterday, we oppose some of the nominees the Democrats put forward. When's the last time you remember anybody on our side trying to literally destroy the life and career and reputation of a political opponent? Any more so than they already had? I mean, with Bill Clinton, there was evidence. He did it. Nothing was made up. And all those people defending Bill Clinton saying it doesn't matter, it's just sex. Hillary Clinton and all these other people responsible for trashing these women that came forward are now the same people claiming that Kavanaugh is scum and that this woman, who's never said a word about any of this for 36 years, is imminently believable. Have to take another break, and I promise we'll come back and resume with phones because a lot of people want to weigh in. Back after this.
The wonder of Rush will continue on the EIB network.
I just checked the email. Many of you are very concerned. Let me read the sample email. Dear Mr. Limbaugh, when you just said we've all done this since high school, so forth and so on, you better clarify what you mean. I know you were talking about underage drinking and playing spin the bottle and playing around. And yeah, but you didn't mean that we've all held girls down against their will like this. Of course not, because I don't believe that happened. That's the whole point here. If we're just supposed to believe what she says because she said it and she lived to corroborate it, well, I'm going to choose to believe Kavanaugh, folks. That it didn't happen, that he doesn't remember it happening, that he thinks it's a case of mistaken identity. I don't believe it happened. That's what's driving me on this. Of course, I do not mean to say that everybody that I knew in high school practiced habitually holding women down trying to kiss them in high school. I don't believe that happened. I was not even referring to that. I'm talking about what happens when high school kids and even junior high, I don't care today or back then, had parties. We all remember the things, the hormonal rages, the coming of age. But I don't believe the allegation. So I'm not even talking about that. I don't believe it's what happened. Maybe, I got another email. Rush, have you stopped to think that maybe this woman really liked Kavanaugh and felt rebuffed? And she's simply taking all this time to get back at him for rejecting her? Well, gee, how can we possibly know any of this? And if she doesn't have to corroborate any of it, then she can allege anything. And we're supposed to accept it and try to disprove what she's saying, and then she will not accept the invitation to come talk about it. Now, I don't even think that I have to make this clarification, because this is my point. None of you would believe that I would come here and admit to engaging in behavior such as that charged by this woman. But we all in high school did things. We drank when we shouldn't. We snuck around our parents. This is part of growing up. And I'm talking about the innocent kind. Don't anybody confuse things here. Kavanaugh didn't do what she's alleging. That's what I choose to believe, using intelligence guided by experience, by the way. Let me ask this. Why is it not controversial to believe what she says, but very controversial to believe his denial? Because that's what I choose to believe here. And if nobody has to prove it, then what is the point? Well, I take it back. He has to prove that it didn't happen. Do you realize how impossible that is? That's why our criminal justice system does not require that the accused prove it didn't happen. You accuse, you allege, you have to prove it, or you're gone. Now, in the real world, as I pointed out, in court, a strategy might be, because juries are juries, your lawyer might say, we're going to have to find out who really did this, and we're going to have to prove they did it as a means of getting your innocence. Even though they don't have a case other than beyond circumstantial, we may still have to do it because the juries are affected by prosecutors. I understand all that, but the rule of law, the accused has to prove. And for them to come out and say that she didn't have to corroborate anything, fine. I'm going to choose to accept, Kavanaugh, that this didn't happen, because that's not what decent people do. Pure and simple. All right, back to the phones. Ashley in West Palm Beach. Great to have you with us. I'm glad you waited.
Hi, Mega Jacob. I've been listening to you since 1998.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay. I have a question to the feminazis that are out there. I would like them to answer to me and other women who may have been victims of anything related to this. What kind of damage are you doing to the American women in general by bringing up an accusation that you cannot prove, that is most likely completely bogus? The American people can smell BS a mile away. They're good-natured and fair-minded people. And this smells to the high heavens, first of all. And second of all, it is a huge disservice to actual victims. They will never be believed. And this will go on and on and on unless this Congressional Senate puts a stop to it. I agree with you that they need to vote on Thursday. And I would bet, I don't have a lot of money, but I would bet this woman will not show up, because the world is watching and she's weighing her options, trying to figure out how she can come across as believable when she's probably lying. And the actual people in this country who will never come forward with their stories are being done a great disservice by someone like Dianne Feinstein and the entire Democratic Party. And I'm infuriated.
You're right. And by the way, this is not the first time. There have been similar examples involving race. This one happens to involve sex. But there have been numerous efforts the Democrats have made which have actually resulted in real victims not being believed when they've come forward because of the circus that attached itself to something that was bogus like this. So you don't believe this woman?
Not at all. And I am a woman, and I did have a similar experience to her allegation in high school. And being that I was somewhat drunk as a teen, and I shouldn't have been, I don't actually have a very good memory. But I am the exception, not the rule. And I can't believe this woman based on her background, because you have to put into perspective that she does wear a vagina on her head. She is an activist. You have to put all of that in perspective. You have to put in the fact that Dianne Feinstein knew about this apparently 6 weeks ago and didn't say anything. In closed sessions, didn't say anything. They are using this because they will use anything. They will do anything to destroy anyone that Trump puts forward. If they get rid of Kavanaugh and he puts up somebody else, they will use somebody else to come up in the last hour to accuse that person. And honestly, I think that they want to use this for the midterms. I think they want to make this the reason why get out the vote. Because if they can get out the vote and generate their liberal activists to come out and vote, we need a better Supreme Court justice, then we would.
I think they're running the risk of a backfire in terms of getting out the vote. If you're right, you said the average American is repulsed by this and can see what's going. If you're right about that, then this is not good for the Democrats and their midterm desires and expectations. Look, Ashley, great call. I'm glad you made it through. We'll be back in a minute.
Hear it now. Read about it in the paper tomorrow. Rush on the EIB network. You're listening to Rush's Week in Review.
All right, it is obvious to me, but I guess not a whole lot of people can say this, but this is a setup. It's a thorough, entire setup. It's got to be a setup, and the Senate ought to deal with it as though it's a setup. If she doesn't show up, then go ahead with the vote. And now the accuser is saying she can't show up. She won't show up until the FBI investigates. Ladies and gentlemen, the whole business of the FBI investigating something 36 years old is dubious at best. But beyond that, accusers don't get to set the date of investigations. Accusers don't get to set the terms of the investigation unless they happen to be Hillary Clinton. I mean, Hillary Clinton was able to tell Comey when she would and wouldn't sit for an interview from which she was going to be exonerated anyway in her whole email situation. But I mean, it's abundantly obvious what's going on here. Let me ask you a question. Let me put it to you this way. What would happen, let's say, I don't know, in the last 10 years up to last week, if any woman had walked into any FBI office in the country and said the following: "Hi, I'm here to report that I was abused 35 years ago. I was at a party. I was 15. I did a little bit to drink, and a 17-year-old guy pushed me down on top of a table and laid on top of me, and then I think a friend came in and did something, and anyway they left, and I was left locked in the room, and I want you to investigate." You think if somebody shows up to an FBI office with that story, if they show up in person with that story, that the FBI is going to give it any time whatsoever? The agents are going to look at each other with kind of wary eyes, and they're going to crack silent jokes to one another. I'm not kidding. You take this out of the realm of a letter to a crazed partisan United States Senator, Dianne Feinstein, and just move this into the victim walking into an FBI office. By the 35 years ago, 25, I'm not sure where, but I know that when I was 15, I was at a party and some guy jumped on top of me. So let's say the FBI agent decides to actually take this further. And in a very respectful way says, well, miss, were you raped or injured? No, not really. Did you report this or tell anyone at the time, 36, 35 years ago? No. What year was this again that happened? I'm not sure. I think it was 1982. Where did this? I don't know. I was so traumatized, I don't remember any of it. I just remember some guy jumping on me, and I was drunk, and he would, and I don't know, but I want you to investigate it. Okay, ma'am, were there any witnesses? Just the one friend of his that pushed him off, and then they left before he could do anything. What would the FBI do with this if that scenario happened in one of their field offices? I will tell you what they would do. Zip, zero, nada. And the reason for bringing it up this way is to try to shine some kind of a different light on this and try to put this kind of allegation in some kind of context. Now, by the way, welcome. It's great to have you back as always. Rush Limbaugh, the EIB network, and at 800-282-2882. The president is handling this in a quite fascinating way. He's saying, I hope she shows up. I want to hear what she has to say. I really hope she shows up. I'm very interested in what she has to say. We all are. And if she shows up and if she's credible, why, then we're going to have to do something about that. Meaning he might have to turn Kavanaugh loose. So Trump's out there allowing for the possibility that the woman is telling the truth and has a credible story that would be believable. And that if it is, then he might have no choice but then to jettison Kavanaugh and look for somebody else. And what do you think Trump's doing there, Dawn? Look, you look disappointed. What do you think Trump's doing? Well, see, this woman is saying she's not showing up until the FBI investigates. There's nothing for any investigative agency to investigate. This is never going to be anything more than he said, she said. That's all it's ever going to be. The FBI can't investigate. She doesn't even remember where it was. She doesn't even remember to tell them where to go. She doesn't even remember for sure what year it was. She doesn't even remember how many people might have been in the room. How in the world is anybody going to investigate this? So the Trumpster, who, by the way, folks, before this gets lost in the unfolding of the broadcast today, President Trump is doing a bang-up job on the recovery from Hurricane Florence in North Carolina. I mean to tell you, he's there right now. He had an all-points meeting today with local and state officials about the plan going forward to facilitate all of the combined efforts of state, local, and federal to bring this part of the country back. Senator Richard Burr, who's chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, he is from North Carolina, and he just said that in 25 years of dealing with disasters in North Carolina, he has never seen the preparation, the coordination, the collaboration of state and local governments with the federal government prior to an event in any way approaching this. This is so far and away much better coordinated. Prep is much better. The work on the ground already began before the storm hit. People are in place now, ready to get in gear. Trump is standing here. Well, he was moments ago. He's at a distribution aid center. And people are driving through in their vehicles and picking up aid. People are passing things to them over the open windows of their cars. And Trump's standing right there greeting people as they drive through. And he's chatting with, these are people who have lost everything, and they've got smiles on their faces, and Donald Trump's chatting them up, and they appear to be very happy. And I will wager that those pictures have the left in a tizzy. Those pictures are destroying the left even more. They're expecting and hoping these people will be throwing things at Trump and flipping Trump the middle finger, the famous flying fickle finger middle bird there. And they're hoping that they would be cursing Trump. But instead, they're enjoying the chance to chant with Trump. And he's smiling, and they're getting aid as they drive through. And it's obvious that they believe he really cares about their plight because he's standing there and talking to them. How many of you, just to illustrate a point here, how many of you have heard any ongoing complaints, stories of woe out of Houston after the hurricane Harvey? No one mentions that storm anymore. Nobody mentions that storm ever anymore. And believe me, if fault could be found, they would find it because the drive-bys have been looking for Trump's Katrina with every storm that's come along, including Hurricane Florence. But the federal government and Trump, coordinating with state and local people in Texas and in Houston, did a great job down there, not to mention J.J. Watt's campaign that raised $35 million. Defensive end pass rushing specialist for the Houston Texans. So Trump is now in North Carolina, South Carolina, doing another great job. There is not a whisper of negatives regarding his administration's efforts on the behalf of people hurt by the weather. Trump is a natural leader. He shows it in the midst of crisis. And he's got to deal with local and state officials as best he can. They're working as hard as they can to get relief aid and, of course, actual insurance-type cash payments to people. But I really think that Trump's natural ability, his proclivity, tendency to handle this with aplomb, with confidence, is just another reason the leftists are so crazed. And speaking of leftists being crazed, I have spent many, many moons on this program detailing for you what I think is an absolute crack-up, the deep state and the media over this totally phony investigation into Trump and collusion with Russia. And I've done my best to express how genuinely outrageous and beyond that it is, how unprecedented it is. In terms of arraying the forces of the federal government against a singular person in presidential campaign and in presidency. We're in the middle of it. We follow it each and every day, so the impact may be not as great as it should be, but this is a genuine abomination of what is happening here, what has happened to Donald Trump for the past 2 years. I have a story here, actually a column. It's by Julie Kelly at AmericanGreatness.com, and the title of her piece, Media Continues Its Slow Suicide. And her opinion is that despite the appearance, despite how it looks on television every day, that the media and their partners, their willing accomplices, are in the process of destroying themselves. They are destroying respectability. They are destroying their own credibility. They are in the process of literally a death spiral because of their contempt for Trump and their efforts to destroy a duly elected president. Now, I realize a lot of you are not, that's crazy. Media is not destroying itself. Media is only destroying Trump, only destroying Republicans. Media isn't hurting itself. I know it's hard to see. And I know it doesn't feel like the media is losing anything. And I know things look depressing. That's by design. But the drive-by media and the Democrat Party are on the same desperate mission. And it is a death spiral fight for survival for them right now. They are smashing, splashing, smashing out, doing everything they can to save themselves. They do not run Washington. Donald Trump does. They are beside themselves that they haven't been able to take him out. They're beside themselves they haven't been able to drive him out. They're beside themselves that they have not been able to split you away from him. And they're going more and more insane over their failures each and every day. The Woodward book, the Omarosa stuff, all of this has come, and Trump is still there, and he's still leading, and he's still dominating, and he's still triumphing. They've got themselves talked into this business. They're going to win the House. They're going to win the Senate. They're going to impeach Trump. Today, they're going to impeach Kavanaugh. If Kavanaugh gets confirmed, if they're not able to stop this, from Eric Swalwell from California, if Kavanaugh gets confirmed, and as expected, the Democrats win the House and Senate, then we're going to impeach Kavanaugh as well as impeach Trump. They are convinced that what they are doing is lauded and being supported and applauded by the vast majority of the American people. They continue to conduct and publish what I think are crazy polls that they end up believing, just like Hillary believed the polls, that she was going to win in a landslide. The latest poll that I saw is from Reuters Ipsos, and you know what it says? The American public is losing faith fast in Brett Kavanaugh. The American public may not support Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. Well, that doesn't matter, number one. But number two, I just refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that a majority of the American people are watching what's happening here and supporting it and applauding it. I think that there is so much disgust out there. I think there is so much outrage. I think people are livid at what they're watching being done to Kavanaugh after having seen it happen to Clarence Thomas and Robert Bork, and after having seen this. Kavanaugh is only getting now what Trump gets every day. Trump gets this every day, and I think people are fed up with it. I think a lot of people are fed up with it. I know the polls are out there, Democrats are going to sweep this and that, but then something got in the way, folks. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there was a shocking special election win by a Republican last night in Texas. Voters elected political newcomer Pete Flores to the Texas Senate on Tuesday, flipping a Democrat district red for the first time in 139 years and bolstering Republican supermajority in the chamber ahead of November elections. Now, wait a minute. I thought Beto, whatever his name, was going to beat Cruz, that the Texas Republicans were going to lose Texas, the Senate, everything else, and that Texas is on the verge of becoming a blue state. Why, that's what all the polls say. Texas is in the middle of going like California and New York and so forth. And then this happened. This is a district that Hillary Clinton won. I forget the majority here, but it's 73% black and Hispanic. It's 23% white privilege, and they elected a Republican. For the first time in 139 years. Pete Flores is a retired game warden. He defeated former state and U.S. Representative Pete Gallego for Texas Senate District number 19 seat after receiving backing from some of the state's most prominent politicians, including Greg Abbott, the governor, Dan Patrick, lieutenant governor, and Senators Cornyn and Cruz. According to the Secretary of State's website, Flores won with 53% of the vote, Gallego at 47%. There were 44,487 ballots cast. This wasn't supposed to happen. Remember, Texas is going blue. This is a blue district in Texas that the Democrats have held for 139 years, and a Republican won it. How in the hell does that happen? Now, my overall point with this is that I think that Julie Kelly has a point. But I have to take a break, as always. We seem right, and I just get revved and ready, and I get right to the sweet spot, and I look at the clock and go, damn.
Listen to what the left doesn't want you to hear. Rush on the EIB Network.
I have cited the work of Lee Smith several times. He's Worked at a website called, I think, Tablet. His work has appeared a lot of places. He's done some of the best investigative work, along with a lot of other people, in uncovering the hoax and the scam that is the Steele dossier, Papadopoulos, the entire series of lies that Trump colluded with Russia. And he's written a piece called Extinction Level. Well, it's not what it's called, but he describes in this piece what he says is an extinction level event for the media. And it consists of much of what he has been reporting on. Text messages between Strzok, Smirk, and Lisa Page. Just the general collapse in trustworthiness that people have for some of these law enforcement institutions, DOJ, FBI, the intelligence community, and so forth. But Smith believes that the media is in the process of literally crashing and burning here and sacrificing every bit of credibility and reputation it ever had in service to the advancement of agenda, and that more people than ever before are now seeing what the media is and what it's becoming. And as that continues to expand, they lose more and more credibility and believability. I know it's hard to believe, but there are people out there actively who think this.
You're listening to Rush's Week in Review.
Welcome back, my friends. Rush Limbaugh, doing what I was born to do, and that's why I have more fun than a human being should be allowed to have each and every day. We'll get back to this media story. It's always going to be here. There is a development here in the Kavanaugh Ballsy story, and that is, well, as you know, what are we going to call her? The accuser? Is that what? The accuser first started out saying that this horrible thing happened, couldn't remember where, not sure the year, not sure the house, and so forth. Can't corroborate anything. Kavanaugh can produce 200 people testifying to his character, 3 or 4 people that can claim that were named that don't even remember the event happening. This woman can't produce any witnesses. Kavanaugh's got a bunch. So the Senate said, okay, well, you know what? We'll delay our vote from Thursday to Monday. Oh, we'll even delay it beyond that. We'll schedule a hearing on Monday where the accuser can come in and Kavanaugh can come in and their lawyers can query each other in the Senate. The senators on the committee will get into the act. And the accuser said, I'm not coming. She didn't respond to the invitation to show up. So people said, well, if she doesn't show up after having been invited, then let's go ahead and schedule the vote and do it tomorrow. This prompted the accuser, whoa, no, I don't think I'm coming until the FBI investigates. Now, I don't care who you are, no accuser gets to determine the scope and the parameters of an investigation. The accuser doesn't get to determine when and who investigates. In no circumstance in the country does that happen. Nowhere. The accuser doesn't get to set the details of this, but that's what she's doing, she and her lawyer. And so now the FBI's got to be brought into this. They don't want to invest. There's nothing to investigate. She doesn't remember where, when, why. She doesn't remember what year. She doesn't remember who all was there. There's nothing for people 36 years after the fact to investigate beyond what is already happening. It's always going to come down to he said, she said. Then the president got in on a deal and said, I'll tell you, we really hope she shows up. I really want to hear what she has to say. I want to find out if she's credible. I really hope she accepts the invitation of the Senate and shows up on Monday. And if she's credible, why, then we're going to have to perhaps jettison Judge Kavanaugh, pick somebody else. Her lawyers say, nope, we're not showing up Monday. We're not showing up ever until the FBI investigates this. So obviously is a setup. So here is the latest development. Are you ready for this? Senator Grassley. This is according to CNN. CNN has an anonymous source claiming that Senator Grassley is now willing to go to California to interview the accuser. Now, does that mean the entire Senate Judiciary Committee would join Senator Grassley on the Senate charter flight to interview her where she is most comfortable? Would she accept this, or would she continue to say, I'm not doing anything until the FBI investigates? Because it is so obvious that this is a setup. She doesn't want to answer questions, and I don't think ever will. That isn't the point of this. The point of this is to delay this nomination because they really think they're going to win the Senate. There are polls out there that say the Senate is now in play. I think that's one of the reasons Feinstein released this. One of the reasons she held this, I will guarantee you. Well, I can't guarantee you, but my intelligence guided by experience, I don't think very many people believe this babe. And I don't even think that's the point. Now, don't tell a lot of people I'm saying this because it'll get me in big trouble. But I don't think too many people really believe her. That's not the point. The option she provides is delay, 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 delay. All her lawyer has to keep saying, I'm not bringing my client forward until the FBI investigates. The FBI, I think the CIA should take a look at it now. Whatever other thing they can come up with to delay, they will. She's not going to show up and answer questions, and I think that's what the president knows. When the president says, I really hope she accepts the invitation. I really hope she shows. I really want to hear what she has to say. And if she's credible, bye-bye, Brett. Well, you know Trump doesn't want to jettison Kavanaugh. So, and don't say this too loudly, but it's obvious some people on our side are trying to goad the babe into showing up. But you don't want to say that too many people could give it away. You know, we want to continue to play the psychological game here. But I don't think anybody, I don't think Feinstein even let the cat out of the bag. She can't confirm that all of this is truthful. And then she had due damage control to walk that back. Did you hear about that? Whoa. Grab audio soundbite. Where is it? Grab soundbite number 7. This is from yesterday on Capitol Hill. She really blew it on this and immediately had to start walking this back and doing damage control.
This is a woman, and I really believe, who's been profoundly impacted by this. Now, I can't say everything's truthful. I don't know.
I can't say everything's truthful. Man, you have not seen an 80-year-old woman do a 180 faster than Dianne Feinstein did yesterday, except maybe Ruth Buzzy Ginsburg in her famous workout now that CNN televised. Man, oh man, did that send ripples of panic through the left when Dianne Feinstein said that she's not, I can't say everything's truthful. They don't believe her. I don't think. If they did that have brought this up, this would have been long ago used. But in the Me Too movement, you simply can't say, you know what, I don't believe you, lady. I just don't. Nobody in politics can say that. We on the radio can say it all day long. But they can't, obviously. So now Grassley has offered to go out to California. Do you think Chuck Grassley really wants to go to California, really wants to interview this babe to find out? They're giving her every opportunity. They're going so far out of their way to be cooperative. Can you think of any other Senate witness where the committee chairman is offered to go to them in circumstances and settings that are amenable to whoever is being queried, interrogated, or interviewed? And if this is true, she'll find a way to turn this. I've left my home, and I can't accept this invitation. I'm getting death threats. I'm feeling very scared. I'm feeling very frightened. I'm feeling very, very unsafe. And so, Senator Grassley, thank you, but I can't even tell you where I am in order to do the interview. And the media will say, then it must be true. You know what the shrinks say, Rush? The shrinks say that the less you can remember about an event, the more likely it is to happen because you're traumatized. Well, if that's the case, Kavanaugh doesn't remember any of it. He must be really traumatized because he doesn't remember a shred of this. She remembers enough to bollocks up the United States Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation process. So Grassley's offered to go interview her. I don't know if it's just Grassley and his staff or if he's going to take the whole committee. Maxine Waters is going to be invited to go along. I have no idea. It's just CNN with the story. But this woman does not want to answer questions. I think they're making it clear. They're bending over backwards. Let her know they want to hear her story. We'll even come to you. We will bring the nation's capital to you, Dr. Ford. And I know what she's going to say. I can't. That my location would be compromised. I've had to leave. I've had to leave my home. I've had to leave my family. I've had to leave my heart because I am under death threat. And Senator Grassley, I don't trust you or anybody in the committee not to leak where I am to these deranged Trump voters that support you. We'll just have to wait and see. Let's get started on the phones when we come back to the phone.
Say what needs to be said. Rush on the EIB network.
Hi, welcome back. Rush Limbaugh, a household name in all four corners of the world. And we start with Don in Santa Clara, Utah. Welcome, sir. You're up first today.
Well, thank you, Rush. It's really an honor to talk to you. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're
bet.
welcome. Okay. The reason I'm calling is I'm a retired Defense Department federal employee, and during part of my career, I was the family advocacy officer at a large Air Force base here in the United States.
What does a family advocacy officer do?
Well, we investigated cases of suspected child abuse, child neglect, and spouse abuse, and we accepted referrals from anybody in the Air Force or the local community.
Oh,
and
okay.
we had a standard, what was called reasonable suspicion, and it was a fairly low a standard where if it even looked like there might be a hint that something really happened, we would open a case, do an investigation, receive reports from other agencies, medical reports, interview all the people involved. But if we didn't feel that it even met a minimum standard, we closed the case and called it no reasonable suspicion. My experience tells me this case has no reasonable suspicion.
Well,
there's no information. There's no dates. It's just, I hate to use the word bogus, but basically there's not even a minimal threshold that we would use to open it. We would stamp it no reasonable suspicion and file it in the archives.
You come from a world of decency and honor and common sense. It's a bygone era. We're now in the Me Too movement where there are exceptions, but for the most part, the woman says it, and you have to believe it, at least in terms of how you approach it. You have to believe it. It is political suicide not to accept it as true or likely. You just can't. Your standard of reasonable suspicion, try that term out. This woman, you could say she wouldn't pass the old Department of Defense reasonable suspicion test, and look what happens to whoever tries to say that. We're living a different era now. Where the nature of the evidence is everything. I mean, the seriousness of the charge is everything, and the nature of evidence doesn't count for much at all.
I agree with you totally, Rush, and it's really sad because a good man's reputation and his life are being ruined. That's why we had the standard that we did, and we were audited by all kinds of people. We cooperated with all kinds of local agencies on and off the Air Force Base. We had to have good documentation for everything that we did. And this thing is totally bogus with no facts. I mean, where do you start an investigation with this other than interviewing this lady, which she's refusing to do? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, she's relying so much here. This is not about what really even happened. This is about simply delaying Kavanaugh's confirmation vote.
Oh, absolutely.
An added bonus is they get to destroy his character and reputation along the way. And if they get away with this, if they get away with this, you can say goodbye to decent people wanting to find their way to Washington to spend any serious time. The only The only people going to be left are going to be deranged progressives running everything, because decent people aren't going to want any part of this. Decent people haven't the slightest idea how to deal with this and don't want to.
You're absolutely right, Rush, and it's really sad that our society has come to this level. But thank you for doing what you do. We're with you, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's an interesting, I'd never heard of reasonable suspicion. Reasonable doubt, everybody's heard of. Reasonable suspicion. It sounds like that was a mechanism that would allow for an agency to investigate something before a crime happened. You know, which a lot of people, when you're talking about spousal abuse or bullying or this kind of thing, how often have your child has been bullied or you have been abused as a spouse and you go to authorities, so I can't do anything if something actually happens to you. This sounds like it was a way to actually look into something before a serious event happened. Reasonable suspicion. Well, as he points out, this wouldn't pass that test. That's a great. There's no reasonable suspicion here other than her coming forward 36 years later. And there's nothing reasonable, period. And that's what has people so frosted here. Don, thank you again. Let's see. Where are we headed next? Well, Chesapeake, Virginia next. Susan, great to have you. Welcome to the EIB Network. Hello.
As Elmer Fudd would say, dittos, Rush. I waited a long time to say that. But yes, I needed to call because I also am one of those angry women who's mad at the angry women, because I was attacked when I was younger, 11 years old, by two boys. And I just wanted to say I can remember every place, the exact place I was, every bit about the incident. And then a year later, one of the same boys attacked me again in a bathroom at a rec center. And thankfully, the janitor helped stop that situation. But I can remember exactly that I was in a school, exactly where I was. And I have to say that my memory was 55 years ago, because it happened when I was 11, and I'm now 66. So this woman saying that her repressed memories, it's just now coming out. My question was, in 2012, when she got the help and she knew he was a judge, why didn't she do something when he was a big judge then? It just baffles me.
Obviously. Well, because the rule in Washington, you can be a reprobate and be on the D.C. Circuit. But when it's time to go to the Supreme Court to affect the balance, then that's when the left is going to step in. And if you're not a reprobate, make up the fact that you are. One quick question with 30 seconds here. You say you remember everything about it. This woman claims she didn't report it until 2012, and now they've got a bevy. They have an army of therapists saying, well, the fact that she can't remember is probably the best proof we're ever going to have that it did happen. Because the more traumatic something is, the more it is tended to be forgotten and suppressed. So I think they're saying in unison, we ought to believe this woman precisely because she has no details.
Well, if you look up some of what the clinical researchers say, yesterday my husband was looking it up, 70% do not believe that repressed memories are valid, and he looked it up again today, and what he found out was that the 70% of research psychologists say that...
I appreciate the call. I gotta go. I just saw the clock again. I'm up against it, but I do appreciate your taking the time. Back here, folks.
The wonder of Rush will continue on the EIB Network.
Only 50 days left. 50 days left. Until you decide the midterm elections to keep America great.
All right, hour two, Sean Hannity Show, toll-free. Telephone numbers 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. All right, the big news from the weekend is this newly released testimony from Lisa Page. Remember, there's 50,000 emails. Release the information. Now, what are we talking about? Let's see the FISA memos or the FISA court applications that were made to get a warrant to spy on a Trump campaign associate. What we're even finding out now with Lisa Page, I mean, I went over their testimony last week with the latest Strzok Page memos. Now, what is previously sealed congressional testimony that we now have is Lisa Page raising doubts about the entire legitimacy of the special counsel Robert Mueller, because she told Congress back in July at the time of Mueller's appointment that the FBI wasn't even sure any crime had ever been committed. Now think of the timing of all of this. Now Page had admitted earlier in the summer that more than 9 months into the federal Russia probe, 9 months, that investigators had found no evidence of any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. None. He said, quote, I think this represents that even as far as May of 2017, we still could not answer that question. Anyway, so Page goes on to admit, I think as far as May of 2017, we couldn't answer the question. Now, this Robert Mueller is now investigating this. On May 18th, one day after the special counsel was appointed, Strzok texts, you and I both know the odds are nothing. If I thought it was likely, I'd be there, no question. I hesitate in part because my gut sense and concern is there's no big there. And Page goes on to explain to Congressman Ratcliffe, well, it still existed in the scope of possibility that there'd be literally nothing, she said, before qualifying probably not nothing, as we probably knew more than that by that point, meaning there was nothing. And top FBI lawyer, remember, she was McCabe's lawyer, admitting that evidence was still inconclusive, saying that maybe an unwitting person was in fact involved in the release of information, but it didn't ultimately touch any senior people in the administration, meaning the Trump campaign or campaign. Then Ratcliffe said, Page left me with the impression, based on her own words, that the lead investigator of the Russia collusion case, her boyfriend Peter Strzok, had found no evidence of collusion after nearly an entire year of investigation. And Nunes now wants to release all the deposition before the election, which I think is a good idea. Now, one person that did get caught up in this, George Papadopoulos, now he was interviewed, and apparently in this interview didn't tell the truth, and George Papadopoulos has now been sentenced to 14 days in jail. It could have been 5 years. And that George Papadopoulos, this guy Downing from Australia that we've told you an awful lot about, and this professor that apparently that he had a relationship with, resulted in him being questioned about what he knew, and he joins us now to talk about it. How are you, George Papadopoulos?
Sean, thanks so much for hosting me.
I mean, I guess you probably hate it that me and others said, well, you're just a low-level campaign person. And I'm not trying to be rude by saying that, but I was around all the campaigns for all that time, and I did not know you at that time.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sean, it's obviously all relative. Of course, I wasn't, a campaign chairman or a senior advisor to the candidate himself. But, I certainly, did my best to help the candidate. I helped organize a meeting between him and the Egyptian president during the Assembly. So, my focus actually was predominantly on Middle Eastern issues and NATO. I had absolutely no background whatsoever in the U.S.-Russia relationship. All I knew about Russia and candidate Trump was that if he was elected president, he wanted to work at some level, generic level with Putin. That's all I knew. And that's actually what I was going into these meetings with these so-called Russian intermediaries trying to do.
Let's talk about this professor that you knew from your time in Great Britain. Tell us about him.
Yeah, so it's the whole setup with the meeting with him it's very strange. Looking back, of course, during the time I was interviewed with the FBI, there was a lot of confusion. But now that I have a more clear picture of what I think was going on, it looks incredibly suspicious. I was working in a organization named the London Centre for International Law Practice in London. This is an organization that has deep ties to Western intelligence in the UK. They then take me to a university called Link Campus in Rome. This is after I'd notified them that I would be leaving their organization and joining the Trump campaign and moving back to the United States. I don't know why they decided to take me on this so-called business trip to this university in Rome, which is known as a spy school that trains Western intelligence. Nevertheless, I thought it's a quick trip to Rome, and then I'd just be leaving to the United States afterwards. I don't know if the stars aligned the way they did, and I was supposed to meet Joseph Mifsud at this spy school in Rome, or if it was by complete coincidence. Nevertheless, I meet him in Rome, and immediately he takes a liking to me and starts saying that he can set up a meeting between Trump and Putin and various other diplomats. At the time, he presented himself as this mid-50s former diplomat with extensive ties to the State Department in the United States, Western think tanks in Europe, and, nominally to Russia and various governments. I took him up on his offer to meet in London a couple weeks later.
Did he ever at any point mention that he can get a hold of Hillary Clinton dirt for the Trump campaign?
So here's the misunderstanding. About a month after I'm talking with him, he sits down with me over breakfast in London and simply states that I have information that the Russians have Hillary Clinton's emails. He said he's coming back apparently from Russia. I never saw emails. He never followed through with this. He dropped a bomb on me, and he basically went his own way, which for me is incredibly suspicious. Why? It made absolutely no sense. And here's why it also didn't make sense to me, Sean. This is a person who apparently has the keys to the kingdom, the one secret that everyone in the world apparently wanted. And
if I recall correctly, that was all being discussed at that time. Who has the emails, right?
Absolutely. It was a public record, and my wife herself has mentioned that it was speculated all over Europe at the time. Now, here's the problem I had with this individual. At the time, around those months, I was trying to leverage what I thought were his contacts with Russia to meet the Russian ambassador in London. This individual could not even introduce me to a single Russian diplomat, but he apparently had this information. For me, it made no sense to me, and it still does not make any sense to me.
All right, and even this before you got sentenced, this guy had spoken out and said you didn't do anything wrong and that he didn't offer you or give you any of that information. All right, let's fast forward. Now all of a sudden, all this information, I guess, gets released, and you become a subject of the investigation. How did that happen? Walk us through it.
I'm just following what I've been reading in the news, like I guess everyone else has.
Alexander Downer gets into the question. You meet this guy in a bar. You guys having drinks together. You were drinking gin and tonics. You might have had a little buzz on. Tell us about that.
I think it's very important for me to contextualize what this meeting with Alexander Downer was, which I felt was a complete setup, and I still do to this day. Alexander Downer did not randomly reach out to me. There was a process leading up to this meeting, and I've been tweeting about it recently. There was an Israeli diplomat named Christian Cantor, who I knew in London, who just hated Trump. He hated his guts. All of a sudden, he decides one day to introduce me to his so-called girlfriend, who just happened to be an Australian intelligence officer and the assistant to Alexander Downer. Now, once I was in the British press demanding that David Cameron apologize to Trump about calling him stupid for his idea about the Muslim ban, all of a sudden, Alexander Downer decides to meet with me at a bar. At this meeting, he begins to take his phone out, what seemed to be recording my conversation with him. I was so suspicious, I actually notified the FBI about this encounter. And he basically tells me that your boss and you better stop bothering my good friend, David Cameron. It seemed like a threat. I have no recollection whatsoever talking about emails. I remember a lot about this meeting, and it was one of the most strange meetings I had during the campaign, along with Stephen Halper.
Okay, so let's get to Robert Mueller and company. When did you get called by the FBI? You contacted them over this. When did they talk to you, and what was that interview like?
I can't really get into details about what was said in my interview, but all I can say is that they contacted me in January of 2017, and I mentioned it in court that the discussion in my first interview in general terms was about Sergei Millian, who was apparently outed as a dossier source a week before. If I was being cultivated by the Israeli government to work as some sort of spy, because actually most of my business contacts were in the energy industry in Israel before I joined the campaign. And generally, if I knew things about hacking and Russian interference. Of course, I had nothing to do with Russian interference and hacking, and I simply told the FBI at this interview that Joseph Mifsud told me that he had that information.
Okay, so then why did you lie to the FBI? Because you admitted when you were being sentenced that you lied, you were embarrassed, you even tweeted such out. Why would you lie if you didn't have the information?
Well, look, I think Michael Flynn as well did not do something, illegal, but you lie but you still lie, and that's a crime. So even if I didn't do anything illegal, lying to the FBI is illegal.
Right, I understand that, but why would you lie? You had nothing to hide, you're saying.
All I can say about it is, Sean, and as I said on your show, it was a chaotic moment, and I have not pleaded guilty to collusion. I pled guilty to lying.
But did you consciously know you were lying, and why were you lying? I'm trying to understand. If you didn't do anything wrong, why would you lie? Or if you didn't think anybody did anything wrong, why would you lie?
I can't really get into too many details about that. All I could say is, obviously, it was a stupid mistake, and it's costed me a lot.
What was the specific lie about?
As far as my understanding is, and the public record states today, is about the timing of my encounters with this Maltese professor, Joseph Mifsud, and the extent of my contact with him.
And do you think that they had taped conversations and they set you up in the interview?
I have no opinion whatsoever about any setups, but I do understand that there was a recording of my conversation, yes.
With the professor. Well, that's called a perjury trap. If they have all the information, then they're asking you questions. Let me ask you this:
Sean,
why did? Go ahead, say what you're going to say, Sean. What?
Oh no, nothing.
What did you mean when you tweeted this weekend? There's a lot to come.
What I meant by that is that if I'm going to be under scrutiny for my interactions with a Maltese professor, the fake niece of Vladimir Putin, which this Maltese professor introduced me to, and a think tank analyst in Russia, then certainly my interactions with Western intelligence officials, Western diplomats who encountered me in incredibly suspicious circumstances, including Stefan Halper, definitely need to be, discussed at the congressional level, because I don't think my story should simply be, quantified as meeting this Maltese professor. He tells me this information, and that's what George Papadopoulos was doing. My story is much larger than that, and in substance and in scope, and I think the American public deserves to know the truth.
Do you believe you were set up then?
In what sense exactly? I certainly believe that Alexander Downer was setting me up for something. I don't know what, but
what about Halper?
Well, Halper, obviously, it's public that he was setting me up for something. I don't know what he was doing exactly, but it's public knowledge that he was part of some operation in London, which I believe the British had to be part of, because why would this operation be targeted against me in London if the British were not aware of it? And I'll tell you another fact. The same day that I met Stefan Halper in London, the British Ministry of Foreign Affairs invited me to tour their offices and to meet with their diplomats. Unless they were completely aloof as to what was going on in London the same day Stefan Halper was interacting with me, then I think it makes no sense.
All right, quick break. We'll come back. More with George Papadopoulos on the other side. This is the Sean Hannity Show. All right, as we continue with George Papadopoulos, who is with us, you have to spend 14 days in jail. How do you think Mueller and his team treated you?
I think, I did my part. I'm certainly going to just give my part of the story. I did. And I just hope that the truth all comes out in the end. That's all I can say.
Do you think if the truth comes out in the end, will it exonerate you?
All I can say is that I'm looking forward to testifying on Capitol Hill. I'm very enthusiastic about it, and I hope my testimony leads to a certain other doors opening.
Well, I mean, that's kind of mysterious. It's sort of like there's a lot to come. Do you have a story to tell about the special counsel and how they treated you?
I certainly have a story. It's a very interesting story, and I'm actually in the process of writing a book about it right now, so it's going to come out. I, of course, don't have an opinion about it right now. There's still an ongoing investigation, but I believe my story and my real opinions about everything that happened will be coming out very shortly.
When are you going to spend your 14 days in jail?
I think my understanding is probably next month or sometime around then. So my wife and I were looking forward to getting that done with and moving on with our lives. But certainly there was a lot more than me meeting with an Australian diplomat regarding my story.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, all that you seem to get caught up in something that The only thing I don't understand is why you would lie over something you didn't do. But we'll get that story when you write your book. We're looking forward to it. Thank you, George Papadopoulos. I wish you and your wife the best, and we really mean that sincerely.
Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate it. We both appreciate it. Thank you very much.
800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. Quick break. We'll come back. We have a lot to get to with Greg and David Schoen. Also, Carrie Severino is going to join us. Also, a woman that's known Brett Kavanaugh straight ahead. And you're listening to the best of the Sean Hannity Show. We'll have more of your favorite guests, topics, and memorable moments. That's all coming up.
Like I am. Rush. Weekdays at 11. Cities 92.9.
You are listening to the best of the Sean Hannity Show.
Check out the show 24/7. Download it to your iPod. Be a Hannity Insider at Hannity.com.
So let me just go back here. This is breaking news right now. You are going to declassify your depositions of some 70 individuals related to the Trump-Russia collusion narrative.
Yeah, so some of them are not even classified. Some of them are just held at the committee. So matter of fact, I think 70 or 80% of them are not classified. The ones that are classified, we will have to send to the Department of the Director of National Intelligence to declassify. But we hope that would only take a matter of days, and they don't do their normal foot dragging where they slow roll, and we don't get these before the election. But just for the sake of full transparency, because there's so much that's out there that's misinformation or disinformation on this Russiagate fiasco, that we needed this information out before the election. And that's why we've been asking the President of the United States to declassify many more documents as it relates to not only Bruce Orr, but also with the Carter Page FISA.
Will the president declassify those documents before the midterm elections?
Well, look, I think he doesn't have any choice. Well, and what you see is the mainstream media and even Strzok's attorneys have said, no, he actually wanted to get to the bottom of leaks. He was really worried about getting to the bottom and making sure nobody was leaking. That's not what was happening. What was happening here, and this ought to scare American people, it scares me, to know that the FBI and DOJ would go out and leak fake news stories in many cases, plant them in many cases, and then pick up those fake news stories to use it as a pretext, and that's the word that they use in their text, in one of their text messages, a pretext to go out and interview American citizens, knock on their door and say, look, we read these 3 news stories that we're not going to tell you we actually planted with the news, and we want to talk to you about these news stories.
All right, 24 now till the top of the hour, 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. Devin Nunes going over the new developments, the Page Strzok text that we told you all about last week. And, let's use this. First, we'll purposefully leak phony information to our friends in the media as part of a, quote, media leak strategy. And then we're going to use that information as a pretext to go interview people about the Justice Department's decision to appoint Robert Mueller. It was one exchange where Strzok and Page are talking about right after the firing of James Comey. Let's make sure Andy starts an investigation fast, quick, before somebody replaces him while he's still there, meaning he's in charge after Comey got fired. And Page admitted earlier this summer that more than 9 months into the federal Russia probe, in a text May 18th, that's one day after the special counsel was appointed, Strzok texts her, you and I both know the odds are nothing. If I thought it was likely, I'd be there no question. I hesitate because my gut sense and concern, there's no big there. And then when she was asked about that by Congressman John Ratcliffe, it still existed in the scope of possibility that there would literally be nothing, she said, before then saying probably not nothing, as we probably knew more than that by that point. The top FBI lawyer admitted the evidence was still inconclusive, saying that maybe an unwitting person was in fact involved in the release of information, but it didn't ultimately touch any senior people in the administration or in the campaign. Anyway, Ratcliffe said Lisa Page left me with the impression, based on her own words, that the lead investigator of the Russia collusion case, Peter Strzok, had found no evidence of collusion after nearly a year. When you tie it all together, it all starts with Hillary Clinton getting an exoneration after committing multiple felonies, the most obvious case of obstruction ever. Hillary gets to continue her campaign instead of being held to the same standard we would have been held to. Then, as she moves forward, after she steals the primary from poor Bernie Sanders, well, then Hillary funnels money through her campaign in the DNC, through a law firm, which, by the way, is a campaign finance violation. They didn't want it on the books as a campaign expense, so they made it a legal expense. They funnel it through Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie hires an op research firm. Why didn't they just pay the money directly? Well, that's a good question. Then they hire Christopher Steele. Now, of the thing that we see with Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Bruce Orr, Fusion GPS leader Glenn Simpson, Christopher Steele himself, they all hate Trump. The one thing they all have in common, that's when the phony dossier that's paid for. Steele himself won't stand by his own dossier. And it gets worse than that. Then that phony information is leaked before the election to hurt then candidate Trump. Then it's leaked after the election to take down Trump. And they still didn't have information of any evidence whatsoever, but a special counsel was appointed. And now it's been 18 long months of nonstop lies and BS. Now the question is, there are some in the media that say there's no such thing as a deep state. Well, I beg to differ. And Jason Chaffetz, former congressman, Fox News now contributor, he begs to differ. He's written a book about it. It's called The Deep State, How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is Working to Destroy the Trump Agenda. Aren't they really working to destroy Trump?
They are. And one of the things I detail in the book, The Deep State, is when the FBI came in and told us that there were 5 people in the Clinton investigation who got immunity. And when we went to go see those immunity agreements, they only brought in 3. And then I just happened to ask, I said, is this all of them? And then she reluctantly said, oh, there's actually 2 more. And then we found out that 2 of the most senior people to Hillary Clinton, Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson, also had immunity agreements. And you know what's fascinating about these immunity agreements? There's no paragraph in there where they have to cooperate with the government. And people like that have looked at these.
So they get a sweetheart deal, unlike, say, what Paul Manafort can't write a book. Paul Manafort has to hand over money. Paul Manafort actually has to testify without his lawyer if they want him to be a witness in something.
And so in the Clinton investigation, not having interviewed dozens of witnesses, not having gone through the full investigation, not talking to the subject of the witness themselves, they hand out these immunity agreements with no cooperation needed with the government, and look at how differently they're treating Donald Trump. That's how this deep state works. They work behind the scenes, and that's what I detail in the book.
Isn't there a certain extent with the constant, never-ending drip, 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 that it seems that they have created enough chaos, enough of a distraction, that people think, oh, there's smoke, there's got to be fire, but there's never been any evidence of any Russia collusion at all.
No, and that's why Devin Nunes is right. You need to release the documents so that everybody can look at what they're seeing and more. But I think it's, somebody in the White House holding it back. There's probably some attorney in there that's holding this information back. But that information needs to be released. We're open and transparent in this country, and that's why you need good oversight, because you had people run amok.
How would you define the deep state, is the title of your book? What is the deep state? People ask me all the time, and I give my answer, but I want to know yours.
They don't hide in some corner. They're open. They're brazen. They don't like exposure. They don't want accountability. But there are people within the bureaucracy that do not want to be held accountable. And one of the stories.
But isn't it more than that? Aren't they working actively to undermine?
Oh, absolutely.
In the case of Trump, didn't they actively support Hillary's candidacy and work actively to undermine the candidacy of Trump?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the overwhelming majority of them are Democrats. They wanted a bigger government with more power, less accountability, and they're brazen about it. The security leaks, for instance, to go after Trump. Even before he's even sworn in, you start to see things going out the door when he's out there talking about with world leaders, and suddenly that information is out there.
Prime Minister conversations. When did that ever happen in American history, right?
Never happens, but it happened to Donald Trump because he's a disruptive president. It's exactly what the deep state doesn't want.
Well, so when you look at all of these names that we're talking about, that we keep bringing up, I think some of the most frightening stuff is the FISA warrant abuse.
Yeah.
Because they used a phony dossier to get it. The irony of it all is it's a Clinton bought and paid for phony Russian dossier. Everyone wants to talk about Russian collusion. but it was used at the highest levels to spy on a Trump campaign associate. And we also had a spy inside the Trump campaign. And there might have even been more FISA warrants, I'm hearing. Is that true?
The name that we're not talking about, because it all ties back to this, is Mark Elias. Mark Elias is general counsel involved with Perkins Coie, involved with Podesta, involved at the DNC, involved with Hillary Clinton. This is the attorney that sits in the middle of this universe and is moving these dollars by the millions of dollars that then generate this product that's fiction that is then used to generate stories, which are fiction. They're fake, to justify action by federal bureaucrats.
So we now know that this was all under a phony pretext, the whole Trump-Russia investigation. Well, why is it allowed to continue?